Today, we're going to read a news article together. We're going to take a complex topic like Donald Trump's legal issues, and you're going to understand it easily because we'll read it together, and you'll learn the advanced vocabulary, complex sentence structure, and even correct pronunciation. Welcome back to JForrest English. Of course, I'm Jennifer. Now let's get started. First, I'll read the headline. Trump asks for hush money conviction to be overturned. Now we're talking about a legal issue, and the word conviction is very important to understand the whole article. A conviction, this is a noun, and it's a formal declaration that someone is guilty. So a judge officially said, "You're guilty." That's a conviction. That's a noun, but it's very commonly used in the sentence structure to be convicted. Convicted, in this case, it always has the ed because it's the adjective and your verb is to be. So you need a subject. Subject, Trump. He's the subject, Trump, and then you can conjugate your verb to be. This already happened, so we can put it in the past simple. Trump was convicted, so always in the D. Trump was convicted, and you're convicted of something. And we'll find out in this article if you don't already know. Now that's the passive sentence structure, to be convicted. It's talking about who's receiving the action, not who's doing the action, because in a legal context, there's really only one person who convicts, and that's the judge who shares the sentence, often determined by the jury. To convict. So you could say the judge convicted Trump. In this case, our verb is to convict, so you have to conjugate the verb. This already happened, so I'll add an ed, and this is the past simple. The judge convicted Trump, or perhaps it would be more accurate to say the jury, which would be conjugated as a collective noun. The jury is made up of multiple people, but we use it as a collective noun. It, the jury, it convicted Trump. I added that there. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not sure which one is actually more accurate, the jury or the judge. Perhaps you can let me know. Now, another very important legal terminology is overturn. To overturn is the verb, but notice the sentence structure, to be overturned. Again, this is in the passive voice. In a legal context, when a conviction is overturned, it means it's annulled, which means it's basically thrown out. It didn't happen. Or it's reversed. Again, it's saying that you were guilty, but if it's overturned, it means you are not guilty. So the decision is reversed or annulled, thrown in the garbage. Don't worry about taking notes because I summarize everything in a free lesson PDF. You can find the link in the description. Let's continue with our lesson. Donald Trump's lawyers, so the lawyers belong to Donald Trump. That's why there is the possessive and there's more than one. Donald Trump's lawyers have asked for the former president's conviction. Again, the conviction belongs to Donald Trump, who is the former president, which is why we have the apostrophe as to show possession. And now you know what a conviction is. Remember, in this case, it's the noun form. It's the legal declaration, the formal declaration. Conviction in his hush money criminal case to be overturned. You know what this is as well, to be overturned, so thrown in the garbage or reversed. Guilty to not guilty. And his sentencing this month delayed. One's sentencing in a legal context is their determination of punishment. So when someone is sentenced, they find out how they will be punished. Will they have to pay a fine? Will they have to go to prison? Will they have certain rights restricted? That's one's sentencing. Now, this is only used in a legal context. Of course, other people get in trouble outside of a legal context. But in home, school, or work, we use the word punishment. So you would ask, what's my punishment? If you do something that you're not supposed to at school, the teacher or principal could punish you. So to ask about how you will be punished, that is punishment. That's the noun form. And here, so they're asking for his sentencing, where they determine his punishment, this month to be delayed. Delayed means it's happening later than expected. You can use the verb delay. In this case, it functions as an adjective because it's to be delayed, the passive. So here, the meeting was. So the verb to be conjugated, this is a completed past action, so that's why it's in the past simple. The meeting was delayed in the ED because it's an adjective. The meeting was delayed. So it's not happening at the scheduled time, it's happening at a later time. And if you want to specify the time, you use until 5 p.m., until tomorrow, until next week. Are you enjoying this lesson? If you are, then I want to tell you about the Finally Fluent Academy. This is my premium training program where we study native English speakers from TV, the movies, YouTube, and the news so you can improve your listening skills of fast English, expand your vocabulary with natural expressions, and learn advanced grammar easily. Plus, you'll have me as your personal coach. You can look in the description for the link to learn more, or you can go to my website and click on Finally Fluent Academy. Now let's continue with our lesson. A letter sent to the judge presiding over the trial. Okay, to preside over is in charge of, or the judge who's leading the trial. Now, technically, you could use presiding over in a business context. The Jack is presiding over the conference or the board meeting, but it's more common to use in charge of or lead in a business context, and then preside over is definitely used in a legal context. So it would be more common to say Jack is leading. Our verb is to lead, and then here conjugated in the present continuous. Jack is leading the meeting. Jill is in charge of. So to be in charge of. I'll add that verb to be so you remember. To be in charge of. Jill is in charge of the conference. So both of these would be more common in a business context or everyday context, and then specifically to a legal context, you can use presiding over the trial. So the letter reportedly cites Monday's Supreme Court ruling that granted the former president immunity from prosecution for official actions he took while in office. Immunity, you may know this one. This means you have official protection from legal action. So you cannot be tried in court or sentenced or convicted because you have immunity. Now you have immunity. You possess immunity. Now let's go back here because notice it said a letter sent to the judge presiding over the trial reportedly cites. Now, reportedly is a very important word and often used in the news or in a legal context because if someone reportedly did something, it isn't official that they did it. It is just suspected or accused that they did it. So you can think of this as stated or claimed, but not proved as fact. And that's the important part. Let's continue. In May, Trump was convicted. So now you see that passive form, to be convicted. And he was convicted by a jury or a judge or both. Now, again, you can turn that into the active. The judge, the jury convicted Trump. So Trump was convicted on 34 counts of falsifying business records. So if you falsify a business record, falsify means to make something false. And you do this on purpose, and this is a crime. And you can be convicted. And after you're convicted, you can be sentenced, where your punishment is determined, unless that conviction is overturned, which means thrown in the garbage or reversed. He will be sentenced on July 11th. So here, to be sentenced, because Trump is receiving. Now, before we use the word sentencing, his sentencing. So you could say Trump will receive his sentencing or sentence on July 11th. I wrote that for you. You could also use this in the active form. You could say the judge, and in this case, the verb is to sentence. And it's in the future simple, will plus base verb. The judge will sentence Trump on July 11th. That's the active form. Notice how it's very common to use the passive form because it's not important who's doing it. It's assumed that it's the judge or the jury, but it's more important who's receiving it. And that's why it's very common to use the passive voice in the news. He will receive his sentence. He will be sentenced on July 11th. His team points out that he signed off on the records while president in 2017. So notice his team. This could perhaps be his legal team, and the his being Donald Trump, Donald Trump's legal team, his team. And notice as a subject, what is this as a subject? His team, I, you, he, she, it, we, they. What's the subject? Well, you know the subject because we have the S on the present simple. So the subject is it. It because it doesn't represent a male or female. It's an object. It points out. His team points out. When you point something out, it's not actually pointing at someone. When you point something out, you have information and you want to highlight a specific piece of that information, or you want to bring someone's attention to something specific. Now notice if you use his team brings attention to, because we have a clause is a subject, a verb, an object, it's a sentence, you need to include the additional words, the fact. His team brings attention to the fact that he signed off on the records. Now, to sign off on something means to approve something. You can use to sign off on in a business context is very common. For example, has Jill signed off on my vacation request yet? Has Jill approved? And you sign off on something. So you need that additional preposition on if you specify the something. His team points out that he signed off on the records while president in 2017, but one lawyer suggested this was unlikely to be considered an official act. Last year, Trump's lawyers similarly argued that the allegations in the case involved were within the scope of his official presidential duties. Allegation is another word that's very common in a legal context. So an allegation, this is the noun form. This is a claim that someone did something wrong, but there isn't official proof. At this point, it's just you did something wrong, but where's the proof? So at that point, it's just an allegation. So Trump's lawyers similarly argued that the allegations in the case involved were within the scope of his official presidential duties. If something is within the scope, it means it's part of the official responsibilities. So let's say this circle here represents the scope, and then in that circle, there are your official responsibilities. So there were probably many more than just 3, but let's say you're on a project and there are only 3 things you need to do: editing, designing, and revisions. Those are the 3 things that are within the scope of this project. So if the client asks you to do marketing for them, you could say, sorry, that's outside of the scope of this project. It's not an official responsibility. So within the scope means you are responsible for it. Outside of the scope means you're not responsible for it, based on the terms of the project that you've established. So you have job duties and responsibilities that are within the scope and others that maybe you do, but technically they're outside of the scope. And remember, this is important because there was a letter that cites Monday's Supreme Court ruling. So in this official ruling by the Supreme Court, it said that the former president, Donald Trump, has immunity, official protection, if they were official actions. So if those actions were within the scope, within his responsibilities as president. So that's why this is important information. So he's saying that the actions he took in this legal case were within the scope. However, a federal judge wrote that Trump had failed to show that his conduct was for or relating to any act performed by or for the president under scope of the official acts of a president. Don't worry if you find this wording confusing, because native speakers, I'm sure in your own language as well, it can be confusing to read legal documents because they're written in a very different way from how people speak. So basically, this judge is questioning if his actions were within the scope of his official presidential duties. That's the sentiment. That's what's communicated in this section. Let's continue. Monday's ruling by the Supreme Court. And what happened in that ruling? In that ruling, they officially said that the president has immunity if his actions were within the scope of his presidential duties, if his actions were within the responsibilities of his presidential duties. So Monday's ruling by the Supreme Court was hailed by Trump as a big win for democracy. Hailed means praised or celebrated. And remember the full grammar of the sentence: was hailed by Trump. So what type of sentence is this? It's the passive sentence, again, because it's focusing on who's receiving the action, not who's doing the action. We want to focus on Monday's ruling by the Supreme Court was hailed as a big win for democracy. You can use this in a business context. The new marketing strategy was hailed by the client. So the client praised the new marketing strategy. And then you can add on, even though it was technically outside of the project's scope. So technically, you shouldn't have done the marketing strategy, but you did because you wanted to make the client happy, even though it was outside of the project's scope. The justices, so the plural, notice that pronunciation, the justices, you need that extra syllable. The justices found that a president had immunity for official acts, but was not immune for unofficial acts. So remember this ruling by the Supreme Court. So the justices are the judges on the Supreme Court. As a group, the justices. So the president only has immunity for official acts. The ruling related to a separate case against Trump. He is suspected of trying to illegally overturn. So now you know what overturn means, but overturn what? Overturn the 2020 presidential election result. So notice here, they're using the verb to overturn, but not in a legal context, however, a very official context, because there was an election in 2020. Trump lost, Joe Biden won. But Trump wanted to overturn that result, reverse that result, throw that result in the garbage. So although it's not illegal, technically, I guess you would consider it legal because the president is legally, officially recognized. So perhaps you can still consider that legal, but overturn. And in this case, it's used as an active because he is suspected of trying to overturn. He's the one doing the action, but suspected. So this is important because if he's suspected of something, and notice this is a gerund expression, to be suspected of doing something, you need your verb in ing, and that's because we have this additional preposition of, you're suspected of something or doing something. It means that it hasn't officially been proven. Again, it's just a claim. So you can think of it as an accusation. It's not officially been proven. So the ruling on Monday that said that Trump has immunity if he's acting within the scope of his presidential duties, if it's an official act, that actually relates to this case where he was suspected of trying to illegally overturn the 2020 presidential election result that gave victory to Joe Biden. Reacting to the Supreme Court ruling, President Biden described it as a dangerous precedent that undermined the rule of law in America. So, of course, Trump's opponent, Biden, had a negative reaction to the Supreme Court's ruling on Monday. Undermine means to weaken, erode, or compromise. And this is used specifically with one's confidence or one's authority. This is commonly used in all contexts, social, business. Constantly criticizing your team can undermine its performance. Because remember, team, the subject is it, can undermine its performance. So it can weaken its performance because the team won't have a lot of confidence to act if the team is always criticized by the superior. So in this article, Biden is quoted as saying that the ruling on Monday can undermine the rule of law in America. And that's the end of the article. So what I'll do now is I'll read the article from start to finish, and this time you can focus on my pronunciation. Trump asks for hush money conviction to be overturned. Donald Trump's lawyers have asked for the former president's conviction in his hush money criminal case to be overturned and his sentencing this month delayed. A letter sent to the judge presiding over the trial reportedly cites Monday's Supreme Court ruling that granted the former president immunity from prosecution for official acts he took while in office. In May, Trump was convicted on 34 counts of falsifying business records. He will be sentenced on July 11th. His team points out that he signed off on the records while president in 2017, but one lawyer suggested this was unlikely to be considered an official act. Last year, Trump's lawyers similarly argued that the allegations in the case involved were within the scope of his official presidential duties. However, a federal judge wrote that Trump had failed to show that his conduct was for or relating to any act performed by or for the president under scope of the official acts of a president. Monday's ruling by the Supreme Court was hailed by Trump as a big win for democracy. The justices found that a president had immunity for official acts, but was not immune from unofficial acts. The ruling related to a separate case against Trump. He is suspected of trying to illegally overturn the 2020 presidential election result that gave victory to Joe Biden. Reacting to the Supreme Court ruling, President Biden described it as a dangerous precedent that undermined the rule of law in America. Do you want more lessons where we review the news together? If you do, then put more, so I know you want more lessons just like this. And of course, make sure you like this lesson, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you're notified every time I post a new lesson. And you can get this free speaking guide where I share 6 tips on how to speak English fluently and confidently. You can click here to download it or look for the link in the description. And you can keep expanding your vocabulary with this lesson right now.